All right, everybody, welcome back to the Glass Less Traveled livecast. My name is Mike Verivi. I am a certified bourbon steward and founder of the Fox Valley Whiskey Society. We're going to explore and introduce you to America's craft distilleries, microbreweries, industry insiders, and professional imbibers to give you the inside scoop on the things you need to be drinking. If you like what you're watching and want to help us expand, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/theglasslesstraveled. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe on YouTube. Tonight we have a cornucopia of people here today. We've got quite a few people here. So we're talking with Hill Distillery out of Dodge City, Kansas. I don't know how it looks on your screen, but we've got Hayes. We've got Hayes Kelman, founder and co-owner. I think I point this way.
Yep.
We've got Stephanie Nestor, head distiller, and we've got Lee Griffith, sales director with Hill Distillery out of Dodge City, Kansas. You guys already said it, but thank you for this. This is what I'm going to be sipping on tonight. So if you guys have, I think you guys have, I know Lee, you've watched an episode or two. So you guys kind of know how this whole thing goes. We'll have some people chime in here over on the side if anybody has any questions for you guys. But what I want to know, and I think what everybody wants to know, is tell us about Hill Distillery. Tell us where you guys are located, what's in your portfolio, and where we can find your spirits.
Well, Mike, thanks for having us on here. It's great to be with you. Great to have all of us here in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So you said it. We are in Dodge City, Kansas. That is the Dodge City, famous from, of course, the television series Gunsmoke. The phrase "get the hell out of Dodge." That's kind of where this originates. So yes, we are in the Dodge City. Let's see. What else do you have? What's in our portfolio? Is that it?
How did this whole thing get started? I mean, why a distillery? Why whiskey?
Well, farming.
Farming.
That's what it all goes back to. Is we grow our own grain. We've grown our own corn and wheat not for making whiskey, obviously, in the past, but for generations and generations. And we were looking for a way to do more with our grain, to stop selling it as a commodity, to make it into an actual product that consumers are able to buy, and kind of do more with the farm itself. And so that's kind of what really launched the whole idea of the distillery, was wanting to do more with what we're pretty good at farming. You know, we know what we're doing on that side.
Right.
So we've got to find a new challenge, a new way to kind of, I guess, keep us excited and keep us rolling along. So
sure.
About 5 years ago, I guess, is when the idea really came about, or I guess came to fruition, when the city had this building, which I don't know if you have pictures of it, or if anybody's seen it. You're welcome to look it up online. I believe there's pictures of it on our website. The old municipal building housed the police station, fire station, city hall. I mean, anything and everything to do with city government back in 1927. And the city was looking for somebody new to buy it, or they were looking to tear it down because they didn't have the resources, the time to spend building this thing back up to anything new. And I like to say they found a couple of dumb farmers that said, "Sure, we'll take it, we'll buy it," and they could sell anything to us, I guess. But it turned out for the best. You know, this thing is awesome. We love the way that it turned out, and how many other places can make whiskey on top of, or how many, what better story is there than making whiskey on top of the Boot Hill Cemetery?
Exactly, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. It seems like a very common story, we have a distillery out here, Whiskey Acres in DeKalb, Illinois, and they were farmers, and they just said, you know what, we've got enough corn, let's start making whiskey. Very historically speaking, you see, the first settlers that came to the United States and started moving westward. As they would grow corn, they decided, okay, well, we need some way to preserve this and sell it, so let's make whiskey. So that's where that's where a lot of these farmers, just like yourself, kind of tie into the heritage here in the United States. Wilson Torres, of course, I think you guys probably, I don't know if I'm sure you guys know Union Horse Distilling down there. Wilson is one of my good friends and watches every episode. So hello to Wilson. Stephanie, what else? So let's talk about the portfolio here real quick. Now you guys sent the bourbon whiskey, which is really, really good. I've actually drank about half of it already. shared it with some friends. What else can we find in your in the portfolio there at Boot Hill?
He asked you.
That's a lead question. Mike, in addition to our bourbon, we have a vodka, and I'll let Hayes talk about our vodka in a little bit. But we do also have a gin, a barrel-aged gin, which is our gin that we throw in a used bourbon barrel and age for a little while. It gives it a great color, beautiful flavor. We have a white whiskey, a red eye whiskey, which is our Wild West whiskey. We have the bourbon, and then we have a straight wheat whiskey.
Okay. So Stephanie, we'll keep going with this. I want to talk about being the head distiller over at Boot Hill. What led you to this place, and what does it mean for you to help pave the way for women in the bourbon industry and in the distilling world?
Okay, well, my road here has been a little unique. I started off as a lawyer.
Really?
I call myself a recovering lawyer.
Oh my God.
I served in the Army for almost 9 years.
Wow.
My last duty station was Fort Knox, Kentucky, and when in Louisville, you have to try all the bourbons.
As you do.
Fell in love with bourbon, and I decided that I wanted to make bourbon. I went back to the Ohio State University. I'm from Columbus, Ohio originally, so that was an easy trip back home, and got my food science degree from Ohio State, and somehow convinced Hayes that I was the right candidate for his position. And so that's how I ended up here. I basically suckered Hayes into hiring me.
It was really tough, you know.
As far as what it means to be a woman, being in the Army, I'm kind of used to being the minority in the field. And so it is important for me to make sure that we produce a quality product, one that I'm extremely proud of. And I have to say, Hayes and Lee make that so incredibly easy for me. I came in with fantastic recipes to follow. Hayes has removed any obstacle for me, or done his best to make my job easier for me by, you know, we've made accommodations in the still room because I'm a little shorter, and just other things. And so it's been fantastic. I'm extremely lucky to have had my first true distillery job with Hayes and Lee.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, so Boot Hill is located on top of a former cemetery whose residents were relocated in 1878, and currently sits in a municipal building that was built in 1929. The building itself is beautiful. You can actually see it. I have posted boothilldistillery.com. You can see it on their website. The building itself is absolutely beautiful and very reminiscent of an Old West courthouse, which it used to be used for. Boot Hill's connection to its local history is ingrained in not only its employees, but its products. What influences does the local history have on the spirits at Boot Hill?
Well, Mike, you know, we kind of tie what we're doing almost to the founding of Dodge City, which was a city that was the first business in town was a bar. Because it took sort of a young entrepreneur that sort of was sidestepping the outlawing of whiskey over at the military installation 5 miles to the east of here. And well, basically the story goes is the new commanding officer that showed up at Fort Dodge banned the sale and consumption of alcohol, not only within the fort, but 5 miles around it. Well, the guy that was kind of running the general store, his name was George Hoover. He was not undeterred by this. He didn't say, I'm just going to stop selling whiskey. He goes back to Kansas City and loads up a wagon full of whiskey and then brings it back here. But he sort of pauses at Fort Dodge and then tied a bandana around the wagon wheel to measure distance. And, you know, using the revolutions of the wheel and measured out roughly 5 miles. outside of the zone of no alcohol consumption, and built a bar and started selling ladlefuls of whiskey to not only the buffalo hunters that were out here and the soldiers, of course, that still wish to imbibe. And of course, right around that time, this is about 1870. And a couple of years later, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad was coming through here. And so, from this like single tent saloon, the very next business was another saloon. And that's where this little front street that started to build itself. So, I mean, this was a town that was literally founded on the selling of whiskey. Now, whiskey was probably not officially manufactured here, although I think there are stories that it indeed was. But so anyway, yeah, our story goes back to kind of 1872, and then of course Boot Hill. This was a place where if you met your unfortunate demise in Dodge City, this is where, and no one knew who you were. This is where your remains were laid to rest. But it was only a cemetery for about 6 years, and by 1878, the bodies were disinterred, and a schoolhouse was built on the site. And then the school stood here for almost 50 years up until 1927, and then that's where the city municipal building came in. And then it was a city building up until the mid-century. By the 60s and the 70s, some of the services, the police department, the court system had moved out. We're actually in the see all the brick behind us. We're in the city jail, or what was once the city jail. But it was all moved out in the 1970s, and then really it wasn't occupied until the last occupant moved out in about the late 1990s. And so really for almost 14 years, this building was largely vacant, unused, and unoccupied. And that's when this little bit of luck and timing kind of sort of came together. Hayes was looking at wanting to start a distillery, and then just so happens that a building on a very famous, or infamous, if you will, location kind of came available. So, we kind of tie our roots back to
the Wild West.
The town was founded on, in the Wild West, indeed.
Hayes, was it important for you as a farmer who kind of grew up in the area and kind of grew up with the lore of the Wild West? Was it important for you to find a building that was this historic, or were you looking for something else and then this just kind of happened to fall in your lap and you're like, oh my gosh, this is perfect?
Yeah, I mean, it was keeping that heritage was very important. When we were looking, we didn't really know what we were looking for. I remember going around with the city and different brokers and things, and looking at different buildings, and just not really being blown away by any building, and thinking that maybe you just build something, maybe whatever you end up doing. But I remember the day that I didn't even think about this building actually. And I remember the day my dad called me and he says, "Hey, I found the building." He was just dead sure this is the building that we're going to build a distillery in. And he told me about it, and I said, "I don't know if I know what building you're talking about." He goes, "You will."
Yeah.
And you see that thing. He says, it was so ugly. It was so awful. It was boarded up. I mean, the bricks were falling out of it. The roof was falling. I mean, this place was slum and blight. And he goes, and so you kind of glaze over it. Whenever you used to look over here at one of the most prominent buildings in town, you would try not to see it. And he goes, that's how he kind of explained it to me. And I remember the next time I came to town, I looked and I went, "Yep, that's okay. That's perfect. That's right on the hill. That's." Somehow we saw the potential in this thing, but it was one of those things that you didn't really want to see when you were here in the past, and now it sticks out very well, I think. So
a good power washer and some TLC always goes a long way.
A little bit, yeah. That's a whole other story if you want to talk.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure the work that especially with a building that old. I'm sure the work that went into it. I mean, I can only imagine opening the doors. You said the building was vacant since the 1990s. I mean, that's, could be upwards of 25, 30 years. Well, you guys opened was it 2000? Is it 2016?
2016 is when we officially opened. Yeah.
2016. So, I mean, going into an old brick building, that old, I mean, I could only imagine walking in for the first time after so many years and just getting that waft of that heavy, dusty, musty, sense from a from an old building. What went into kind of turning it from what it was into what it is now?
Oh, I'll try and be quick. So the first thing that happened when I first walked into this building was there's the staircase in the back of the building, kind of that we use more as a private up to our office area. And I remember that staircase you could see through the roof into this. You saw the sky, and it was the middle of like February, I want to say, or January, and there was a frozen waterfall coming all the way down the stairs.
Oh,
so that was my first first view of this building. And so, of course, that sold me on it. And we bought the thing. And as farmers, we have we're kind of eternal optimists, I guess, because we're the ones that plant seed in the ground, and maybe it'll rain, and maybe we'll make money, or maybe it won't. But all you can do is think the best of it. And so I remember showing up and saying, "Okay, let's get after this thing with sledgehammers, and we'll bring an old grain truck up. We'll haul away a little bit of junk, and that's all it's going to take." Well, 10 40-yard dumpsters of trash later, that we pulled out of the whole thing just from walls, and we really gutted it. Took it back from being office space. We opened it back up into a wide open building again, and jumping through all the hoops with historical and with the city, and trying to keep everything up to code. When they built the building in 1929, they weren't looking at code necessarily the same way we are. They also weren't building it to be a distillery, so we had a lot of hoops to jump through there. But we redid. I think we put in around 4,000 bricks on the outside of this building. We had to look and find the exact brick, try and get as close as we could to it. We replaced about 100 panes of glass. Kept most of the original. Anywhere that there was an original window, it's still here.
Yeah.
We put new glass in, but anywhere that it was original, we left it. Replaced the roof. We took the entire Spanish roof off. Redid all the underlayment, put it all back on, brand new electrical everywhere, brand new HVAC everywhere. It's basically we took it down to the core of it,
sure,
and rebuilt it back as best we could with all newer things, anyways, and
so trying to keep it as original as possible, and kind of. So it at least looks like it may have, back in, the 1880s.
It looks very similar, yes.
The Red Eye whiskey is Boot Hill's way of paying homage to its Wild West past, and is described as being trail aged and blended using whiskey as young as 2 months. Tell us about this award-winning whiskey, by the way. So tell us about this whiskey and what influenced its creation.
Well, it kind of came down to, this is all our whiskey. This is all our process. We started in 2016 and started distilling sometime after that. And it was kind of just how the timeline worked, more or less. They started
before that, Lee.
It was?
Sorry. Yeah, we started in late or early 2015. We started. No, I can't remember.
Some years ago.
Early 2016 is when we really, in earnest, started actually making things. Early 2016. Sorry.
We had to try the equipment out first, right?
Yeah, we started planting things and we started aging. Yeah, so really, legally, that was the first.
So we had to. It's kind of just we had to start somewhere, and this is all Hayes's grain coming off of the farm 50 miles southwest of here. And you got to start somewhere, and actually it kind of goes back to the white whiskey, which was 1 week old, and it was sort of one of those aha moments of sort of trying whiskey after it's been in a barrel for a short amount of time and going, this is pretty good. The Red Eye was just the next kind of iteration of that, next expression of that. We called it Red Eye as sort of an homage to the style of whiskey you would have gotten in the Old West in the 1880s. Whiskey was it wasn't a lot of old, long aged whiskeys that was coming out to this area. A lot of it was distilled in the Kansas City area and over in Missouri, and or even distilled by dubious means, rectifiers that were sort of just putting whatever colored ethanol or whatever in a bottle.
Spit or something like that.
Gunpowder, tobacco spit, and all those. There's some truth to that. that's what was coming out here. So Red Eye was kind of definitely not a long aged whiskey, if indeed it was whiskey at all. So that's kind of where we landed on the idea of, yes, after we were using different size barrels, 5 gallon, 10 gallon, up to 53 gallon, and then the smaller the barrel, the faster the aging not faster, but more surface area comes in contact with the whiskey. So we were getting a good amount of color and flavor in a relatively short amount of time. Then you factor in, of course, the climate of western Kansas. It's hot, it's dry. You get a lot of the wild temperature swings, and it was moving along the maturation of our bourbon mash, which was a 51% corn, 49% wheat mash. It was just moving along very nicely, and so it was kind of, again, that aha moment of, hey, you know what? Getting these barrels, this is pretty good stuff coming out, and most importantly, it's our whiskey.
Yeah,
it wasn't coming from any place else. This was the start of our program, and almost with the white whiskey, the red eye whiskey, and now you're tasting bourbon. That's almost like going through the aging process in real time. It's the same mash bill all the way through, and the only difference being the amount of time it's been in the barrel. So the red eye has actually been one of the biggest sellers in our state. We're distributed here in Kansas, of course, and it moves rather rapidly. And of course, as we go through our different batches, we're pulling out older and older barrels.
Sure.
And it's just getting more and more developed flavor, and then
getting better and better.
Yeah.
So
and the next iteration, of course, is the bourbon whiskey. That's and the only reason, of course, we're not calling it a bourbon,
which is what I've got,
which is what you have. The only reason we're not calling that a bourbon is because maybe in some cases we would reuse some of those barrels.
Sure.
And of course, bourbon has to be a first use barrel.
Sure. So I do want to get to the white whiskey, but real quick, Wilson wants to know, and this is maybe for all of you or for whoever was there during the process, what was the most frustrating aspect of the resurrection process, especially in an old building like that?
Oh man. There was a lot of, I deal with what you throw at me, I guess. So it's hard for me to say what the most difficult one was. I feel like it was all just a great big challenge, and I don't know if I can pick one thing, but maybe just dealing with the building as is. Having this, and on one, it's a blessing and a curse, I guess, because this is the building, this is what we get, and we get to make it function the way that we can. And having that discussion with the Historical Society of, well, we're not building a jail and a police station, a fire station, and a city hall. We're putting a distillery in here. And so kind of working back and forth with them of saying, well, we need to make a few little changes. We'll do our best to keep it as original as possible, but there will be some things that we have to change. But at the same time, it was almost like some things played out perfectly. And we have a step down from our actual distillery to our bottling room. And so it works pretty well to gravity feed into our bottling room instead of having to actually pump into the bottling room.
Sure.
Those little things like that just worked out perfectly because it was the way it was. And the other big thing on it being built as is, you don't sit there and worry about, well, why didn't we design it this way? Why didn't we make this change? No, this is what you have. Deal with it. And and so that solves some anxiety of I can only imagine if you were building an entire distillery from ground up, and then you get to the end and we should have put that room on the other side.
Damn.
We didn't get that pleasure. It was what it is. So
right. Deal with the hand you're dealt.
Exactly.
So we talked about white whiskey. White whiskey is growing in popularity, though it's still kind of hard to define and regulate. Brands like PBR, Maker's Mark, Buffalo Trace, and many other craft distilleries have their own version of what some would just simply call moonshine. Boot Hill's white whiskey won an award in 2017 at the Washington Cup Spirits competition, and is described as having notes of vanilla, black pepper, brown sugar, and obviously corn. Talk to us about the white whiskey and what goes into making that.
Well, it's essentially, like I said, it's our bourbon mash, and it's kind of where we started with 51% corn, 49% wheat, a real high wheat mash bill. And again, like I said, this is our own whiskey, and so this is a sort of the starting point. As I think we kind of described it one time, it was sort of moonshine that went to finishing school. or refined moonshine, I guess. I don't like to use the term moonshine, honestly.
Yeah.
Because, we pay all the taxes on it.
Right.
So I like to say it's new make whiskey that that got a little refinement, got a little time in the barrel, and I think it's kind of maybe not maybe becoming more and more common, but of taking your new make and putting a little bit of age on it.
Sure.
The barrel tempered it just a little bit, even in that short amount of time. It brought in a little bit of color. It has a little bit of a straw color to it, and kind of just tempered some of the. It's still kind of raw and grainy on the nose, but that wheat comes in on the back end of it and really softens everything out on the palate.
Yeah.
As far as what you do with white whiskey, and I get, when I'm out doing tastings out in the world, I get reactions both ways, because I sample people with the white whiskey and then the red eye whiskey and now the bourbon, side by side. And so again, they kind of get that aging process experience. But I get so many interesting comments. Some people prefer one or the other. And of course, as we know, taste is so subjective, you like what you like. I would get reactions both ways between, someone might prefer the white whiskey over the red eye or vice versa. And, but yeah, like I said, not a lot of folks are drinking 1 week old whiskey.
Right.
And so, it's, if that's what your palate goes toward, then absolutely. I think, this is probably one of the best ones that's on the market, and might be a little biased, but I know we've got some.
It did win an award, which is not necessarily common for, you don't see a lot of new make winning. Yeah. Really, I mean, I don't want to say awards at all.
Yeah.
But, it's surprising. I do a lot of research before I conduct these interviews, and when I saw, I was like, oh my God, they won an award for their new make. Like I've of the episodes that I've done so far, that's a first.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if you're familiar with.
Thing I want to add in on that award deal. Our Spirit Journal, Paul Pacalt.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you read that, but he reviewed it, and he said it's one of the finest, if not the best, unaged so-called white whiskeys going. While I have often lambasted the American subcategory, this offering sets a new tone and a new standard for the category. That was early on, and that's still, I love that. I just pulled that out of the monitor. That's like, if I ever get sad, that's one of my favorite things.
That's actually not the computer monitor. That's just framed in Hayes' office right now. Just that quote.
Yes. That was mind blowing for us. That was in 2018, September 2018. And, when we sent that in, it would have been much before that. And so that was really pretty early on for us.
Yeah.
And, to get that kind of praise on our white whiskey, like you said, it's
right.
Whiskey. I mean,
right. Young whiskey.
So,
I do want to remind everybody that's watching, if you guys do have any questions or any comments or anything that you guys want to ask Lee, Stephanie, or Hayes, or myself, please feel free to ask away in the comment section. So we're gonna get to the sciencey questions here. The bourbon that comes from Boot Hill only utilizes a 2-grain mash bill, those being corn and wheat. Unlike many distilleries who utilize malted barley to kickstart the enzymatic process, you guys have opted out of using malted barley and instead use what I assume a flavorless enzyme to assist in converting starch into sugar. What was the reasoning behind Boot Hill only using 2 grains in their mash bill?
Stephanie, I'm going to let you answer.
All right. It's simply location. The Kelman farm does in fact grow barley, but we don't have ready access to a malt house. And it is incredibly important to us to truly be a soil to sip distillery. We could have easily bought malted barley from another facility,
sure,
but it wouldn't have been ours. It wouldn't have been grown on the farm. And that quality control and that level of care is extremely important to us.
Sure. It's also really interesting, and I'm sure Wilson, who with Union Horses is watching right now. They also only utilize, along with I believe Wilderness Trail, utilizes a 2-grain mash bill. They forego the malted barley, and it's actually interesting. You guys being very associated with the Wild West, that's historically how whiskey was made. It was just very wildly fermented, and just whatever happened to land in the pot landed in the pot. So it's very interesting that, you know, maybe it might have not been done on purpose, but, you know, paying homage again to that Wild West history and historically, you know, that's how whiskey was made. It was either one or it was two grains. Do you think that it also helps without having that malted barley? Do you guys find that it's a little bit easier to control the flavor profile because you're taking out that one grain? You can focus on, okay, this is the corn, this is the wheat, or this is the rye, or whatever it is. Do you find it a little bit easier without having that malted barley in there?
I would say so. I mean, that was one of the first things in the very beginning, anyways, was the less variables we can add to this. You know, because we didn't know what the heck we were doing when we started this thing out. We were going to throw some grain in and figure it out. And so the less variables that you can have, the more exact you can be at this, which is
Sure,
basic. But you know, someday we'll jump into some more grain bills and maybe someday we'll figure out how to malt some grain here ourselves and also do that side. So we just used what I guess, well, maybe that's not the best way of saying it, but use what you have available. And we didn't really have a choice to use malted grain or not, as long as we wanted to stick with our growing it ourselves.
yeah. So, and there's Wilson, soil to sip. I dig that. So you guys had mentioned, Lee, you had mentioned the aging process, and you had mentioned the barrels. So when I received the package that you had sent, Lee, the first thing that popped out was the contrast between, the label is absolutely beautiful. I love this label. It was the first thing that I noticed, and I thought, man, that's a really good, it's a good looking label. But the other thing that I noticed is how the deep amber color really just kind of makes it stand out. Most of us know that 100% of the color in whiskey comes from the barrel during aging. What can you tell us about not only the barrels, but the aging process that each whiskey in your portfolio undergoes?
Well, so as you know, the barrel sort of acts as a couple of factors. It acts as a filter, it acts as a coloring component, and it acts as a flavoring component. And you know, all these barrels are just sitting in wherever they happen to be located. In our case, it's actually in the old part of the old firehouse, which is where the distillery is as well. What affects that is just the wild temperature swings. You know, we're out here in western Kansas, and it's hot, it's dry in the summer, and it can get real cold in the winter. And through that expansion and the contraction of the barrels is what's, you know, starting to refine that the new make spirit. And you know, the bourbon itself, this was all, you know, what you're drinking right now is distilled, probably, Hayes, correct me if I'm wrong, distilled in late 16, early 2017, probably more 2017 by now. And then it was filled into a barrel, and we forgot about it for about 2 years. And, you know, again,
I didn't forget about it, Lee. Well, I didn't forget about it.
We knew it was there. We were just, you know, we weren't going to mess with it at this point.
Worried about it the entire time.
Yeah.
Not worrying about that whiskey. You did too.
Yeah, we did. To tell the truth.
Yes.
Right.
Where are you guys getting your barrels from?
All over the board. You know, or we've tried them from all over the board. But right now, all of our barrels come out of ISC.
Which is, it's for those who don't know, ISC is the Independent Stave Company.
Yeah, and we've tried. We've had a couple we really didn't like. We've had a couple, you know, but we've tried to. I guess that's another one of those things. We don't know what the barrel's like until we try it, and
Sure.
and then to try it, it's what, a 2-year process for us to see what we think of that barrel. Obviously, we want it to hold the whiskey, and we've had some issues with some of those that. Other companies that might leak a little bit, but there's a lot of really good coopers in the U.S. now, especially with all the craft whiskey coming up.
What are you guys using like right now for? So this one, so your Boot Hill bourbon whiskey. So I've got batch 3. What are you using? Is this like a char 3, 4, 2? What are you guys using as far as like the char? There's a lot of whiskey nerds not only that watch this, but in the Fox Valley Whiskey Society that I operate, that are probably gonna chime in at some point, like, tell us about the char. Make sure they tell us about the char in the barrel.
So I think we're using number 3 and number 4 primarily. I think we've gotten a handful that are spiral cut even on the inside, but not the early ones. What you're drinking right now, that wouldn't be the case. I think we got a couple of those spiral ones, just kind of almost an experiment, see what happens. But yeah, 3 and 4 char, just kind of that mid level.
Sure.
Was what we have used to date. What's produced, what's in that bottle right now.
The spiral cut is interesting that you mentioned that. So, pardon me. For those that might not know what you're referring to when you say the spiral cut, what can you tell us? What does that do that might be significant to the whiskey? That spiral cut on the inside of the barrel. What does that do to the product?
Well, it essentially just increases the surface area that the whiskey comes into contact with. You've got this sort of, inside of a barrel, it's all burned on the inside, and only so much liquid can come in contact at once because it's just sort of there.
Mm-hmm.
If you had sort of these little nooks and crannies in that barrel, then it's a little more surface area that the spirit can come into contact with.
Sure.
That's all it essentially does, I think, is just increase the surface area that the spirit comes into. It's
interesting that you mentioned that, because it was I'm reminded of all places, Jack Daniels, that does something similar with their Sinatra series, where they actually cut horizontal lines in each one of the staves just to give it more of a surface area. But it's interesting that you do that, because of all the episodes that I've done and all the people that I've talked to so far, you're the first that is even that's mentioned it. Maybe not that utilizes that technique, but has mentioned it. Regarding kind of that cool experimentation, what does this do? What does that do? Being a craft distillery who also grows their own grain gives you flexibility to experiment with mash bills, barrel fermentation, and aging. In 2017, Boot Hill released a tasting room only release of an experimental collection, which then saw 3 more releases, including a barrel-aged gin. Tell us about the importance of experimenting at the craft distillery level, and what we might be able to expect coming out of the distillery next.
Want me to go?
Who wants to take that?
Okay. Experimenting it's life for craft distilleries, in my opinion. There's no way we can survive without experimenting and trying to do something different than what these other guys are doing. And on top of that, we're handed this perfect stage that we can show people in very small quantities what we can do. That's how we first released our very first bourbon we ever released was on the experimental series, and number one, because we were really worried we didn't have the quantity to release the full scale side. So, but that shows us, we get those out into people's hands, and they can kind of tell us whether it's good or not. Which I think that usually, if we all think it's good, it probably is. But the community might think differently. And it just, I don't know. It's a great way for us to try new things and do it in smaller quantities that some of these other guys are not able to do because they're so much more massive than us.
What do you guys have right now? So I mentioned the barrel-aged gin. What do you guys have right now that there was what did I say? There's 4 releases. What were those 4 releases, which are now, I believe, probably all sold out at this point? So, tasting room only, they're limited release. But what were those 4 releases that you guys had come out with?
We skewed away from the whiskeys for a little bit there once we started releasing our kind of successes from the experimental version. We released our bourbon, and then we released our straight wheat whiskey in the full strength. So I've got it right behind me. So we had bourbon. This is the first one. Then we had a wheat whiskey as the second. Then we went to the barrel gin, and then our next one was another bourbon. I can't remember the exact differences in them, but I know it was a lot.
It was a corn bourbon, 100% corn.
It was 100% corn, yes, and that was awesome.
Oh, really?
And so that kind of attracted us to doing more corn, because in the beginning, we really didn't like the taste of the 100% corn. We weren't big fans of it as new make, and I'm still not a big fan of it as new make. But put it in wood for a little while, it does some amazing things to it. So,
Stephanie, what about you? I'm curious as the distiller, coming into work every day and saying like, oh man, I want to do this mash bill, or I want to try this, or Hayes has this version, this species or this varietal of corn. What are maybe some thoughts that you have running around upstairs that you're like, oh man, I really want to do this, that maybe you've thought about doing, and maybe might you can maybe like hint at something's coming out in the future. What have you? What gets the hamster running upstairs?
We do have a couple of mash bills that I would love to experiment with in the future. Specifically, I'd love to have a rye whiskey. I'm a big fan of ryes, and then it's just playing with making sure that we have grain from the farm, and then playing with the specific mash bills and yeast combinations. I also really like the idea of finishing some of our bourbon or other spirits. And Hayes also had that idea before I came in, had thrown some fun things in barrels. And I don't want to reveal those because those are usually our Black Friday releases or special releases. So I'll defer to Hayes on whether or not he wants to reveal what some of those things that we have in the pipeline are. But we do have fun experiments ready to go into bottles shortly.
Regarding the barrel finishing, what is there anything in the area? Is there any other breweries or maybe wineries or something in the area that you guys kind of partner off of for that?
Yeah, there are a few breweries and a few wineries in the area, and we do a kind of a barrel swap with some of the vineyards and breweries where they'll age red wine in it and then give it back to us so we can finish some things. And
interesting. So Hayes, any being the guy in charge, what can you hint at?
What can I hint at? Well,
First
off, I can tell you that there is rye sitting in one of our grain bins out back. So that will happen. That's a ways down the road. Steph's been pushing me to make it happen, but we'll see. We've got too much going on. We'll get there. We should set a goal right now.
Maybe later on this year, a trip to Dodge City is in order.
Yeah, but the other things we have coming are some barrel finish, not whiskey, or is the very first ones. Anyways, there we did some wine barrels, and we finished our gin and our vodka on 2 red wine barrels.
Really? That's really interesting.
It's awesome.
What does that end up like?
I don't know. You guys can talk about it. I love it. What do you think?
Well, our barrel aged gin is again biased, but pretty fantastic. And it's kind of that bridge between whiskey and gin. And I think barrel aged is sort of becoming a little bit more into the mainstream, although definitely not in our part of the world. It's not. The wine barrel influence on it is pretty cool in what we've tasted so far. And I'm not sure exactly how long we've let the wine barrel where we're at on the timeline on that. But I tell you the vodka. I always thought who would age vodka? Why would you ever do that? But I kind of get it now. That it might serve a place, and it is definitely going to be something that's not a common thing that you see out in the world, and it's going to be kind of fun. When
tasting room only release, probably.
Say again.
Tasting room only release for that.
The start, yeah, it'll be.
We got another trip planned,
Yeah. Dodge is not, it's not that far away. You can make it in maybe a day.
I don't think it's too far away. Dina's looking at me like, oh, okay. So we're talking about barrels and barrel finishing. I want to talk about, obviously, I think one of the more, and I just happened to stumble across this the other night, and I actually sent the link to a handful of my friends, 10 of my friends, And I said, you guys have to check this out. And please, for the love of God, tell me you want to do it. I want to talk about the 21003 Barrel Club. Talk to us about that, how to sign up, what do buyers receive. Give us the lowdown on this exclusive club.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's your opportunity to own a whole barrel of whiskey, literally from the beginning, from its genesis. When you talk about, say, barrel picks from the big boys, you can go to you can get a giant map of their rick house and pick which one you want and go through the barrels. No, this isn't that. This is like you can go. We will distill it, and this is sort of a long-term relationship. We're going to distill the whiskey and fill it into whichever size barrel that you choose, but a 5-gallon, a 10-gallon, a 30, or even maybe up to a 53-gallon. And then we're going to be best friends for however long you want to age that whiskey. And it's
and beyond.
Do what?
I said and beyond. We'll be good friends.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Limit our friendship here.
What sparked this idea to have the public come in and say, okay, here's, let's say you choose a 5-gallon, which I think, this might be, I think it was $3,000 for, I think it was a 5-gallon, which
Correct.
I was like, 10 of my friends, $300 a piece. Let's go down to Dodge City. We can be involved in it from start to finish. Right. And then it's similar to a barrel pick, but kind of like also like very vastly different from a barrel pick. And I said, guys, it's $300. Like you've spent very close to that on a bottle. So let's not discuss this. Let's just do it. What was from the very beginning, whose idea was like, hey guys, let's have the people come in and just do their own thing. Where did this all stem?
I think the very first barrel we sold was before we were even open. And we were looking for a way to kind of help out some of these charity auctions around that had, were already calling us going, when are you guys going to help us donate to this big auction we have? And what do we have to offer? As a distillery that had nothing. I mean, I don't think we even had a building yet when the first one was sold. And so it's why don't we sell, it's basically like a barrel future. You can buy the futures of a barrel of whiskey for your very self. And it just kind of evolved from that, from looking for a way that we could offer something to this auction. And then all of a sudden it kind of made sense to sell them to the people. And we don't sell a whole ton of them necessarily, but the right customer, it takes the right person to want to spend $3,000 on them. Yeah. They're out there. I know.
Yeah. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And if you're wanting instant gratification, this is not the way to do it.
No.
This is you're following we're having to just sort of go experience what we're experiencing as going through the aging process. And we obviously allow anyone, allow the folks that have them to come in and taste it at any point. And want to come in every week, you can taste it. But most of them wait about 3 to 6 months roughly.
Sure.
But you get to go through the aging process, and I don't know, that's just kind of a different experience. This is something that is really a lesson in patience, and it's kind of just like I said, it's dragging the person along on the journey that we're already on and have been going through.
And for those who are wondering and thinking like, well, oh my gosh, I have to wait 2, 3, 4 years. A 5-gallon barrel will age your whiskey much faster than you think. So you don't have to wait that long. And in fact, it might be advised that you actually don't wait that long, especially on a barrel that small.
That is very true.
So 21003, I assume, is your distillery number licensed through the government. What about, and this is primarily because I'm very interested, and I know people out there are probably thinking like, well, what happens? So say I sign up for this, for the Barrel Club. I come out to you guys and Stephanie, we work together, and Lee and Hayes, we all work together and say, okay, this is the mash bill, this is the barrel size, and then what from there? Do we go through the distilling process?
So the more involved is on the bigger barrels. On the small 5 and 10-gallon barrels, you get to choose from any of our mash bills that we have. If you want to wait until we have rye mash bill out, or if we've got we kind of give you some options of playing with it, but you have to use one of our predetermined mash bills at that point, because it is such a small amount. But you do get to come out, bring really whoever you want. I think we say up to 10 people or so. We'll fill that barrel. We can do it together, or it could be a deal where you just go, look, I want to have your bourbon in my barrel, put my name on the barrel, and slap it up there, and then we'll. Because some people aren't as interested in the beginning part, but they want to try it when it turns into actual bourbon or whiskey that they can enjoy. And then you come out and try it as often as you want. And then as soon as you're ready to bottle it, what we usually do is we bring in a group of your friends, again, 5 to 10 people, and we go through all the steps, dump it out, filter it. If you want it filtered at all, I mean, it's truly your product. So we kind of let you make the decisions. A lot of people, they ask us to help them because we have a little bit of experience with picking out good whiskey, we think, and we encourage them either to barrel right away or bottle right away or let it sit for a little bit longer.
Sure.
We've had some this summer already that have inquired about theirs, and with the COVID-19 going on, and we've tried them, and we've kind of said, let's wait another summer, because summertime is when really exciting things happen in our whiskey.
Yeah.
It gets hot, and we see some great things happen between now and September, October, when it starts to cool off.
Well, I'm sold. I'm sold.
You get to choose the proof too. So this is your whiskey. If you want to bottle it at 120 proof, you sure can.
To my bottle share and my bourbon share group that's watching, we've had some conversations about it already. I'm telling you now, it's it's going to happen. So delay it all you want. This is a very simple question. A lot of people are very curious, getting into the craft distilling world and wanting to learn more about each distillery. One of the things that pops up very often is the stills. Everybody's very interested in, what kind of still you use. Tell us about the stills you use at Boot Hill and what effect they have on the portfolio of spirits.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
All right. Well, as a soil to sip distillery, one of the things that Hayes is very big on is using local businesses to the extent that he's able, as well as going with the little guy instead of the big manufacturers. So we have a still that is probably one of a few, very few in the country. Unfortunately, the still manufacturers are no longer in business, but it is a hybrid still. And that's the primary workhorse that we do. It's a 500-gallon still, 520-gallon still. Complete our stripping runs and then switch it over to the columns to do the spirit runs on. We do have a 100-gallon Still Dragon column still that we produce our award-winning vodka. I'll get that in there too.
Make sure you put in there award-winning.
And gin on. And then we do have a 20-gallon Coda hybrid still that we can do some experimental work on and not have to run it through the large still.
So when you say hybrid still, you mean pot still and column still on the top. Absolutely. For those who might not know what a column still is. I was talking with, and I can't remember if it might have been Wilson, it might have been one of the other, 20 or so people that I've talked to. Through the Fox Valley Whiskey Society, I do a lot of we did before this, this whole thing happened. We did a lot of events, and I would kind of teach the history of whiskey. We would do a whiskey tasting, and one of the things that I learned from the distilling world is that when you use a pot still, the condensation that forms on that oniony bulb kind of drips back onto the mash, and it really kind of softens that that blow, that harshness from some of the grain, makes it a little bit sweeter, a little bit softer. Do you find that using that combination still versus just using a column or vice versa helps create specific flavor profiles? Do you get different profiles out of each still that you use?
We do. We do get different flavor profiles out of, but it's subtle. So.
So you probably never even noticed.
When we use, so the way our still's set up, it has the pot stills on the side, and then we come off the top of it, and we can either shoot straight over into our condenser,
Sure,
or up through the
and up into a column at that point. It's not stacked necessarily.
okay, I got you.
But, so we can run a straight up pot still run, no deflegmator, no cooling on it at all. It's just straight pot still. It's pretty inefficient. We don't usually run that way unless we're doing our stripping runs.
Right.
But we have played with some of our bourbons. Some of the barrels in the back are straight pot still, 100% pot still runs. And you do notice, a big chunk of that too is just the lower proof that comes off. You're not distilling quite as high as you can, running through a few plates and having a deflegmator on top of it, cooling it back and getting to the exact proof that you want to be at. You're controlling it all by the heat that you're giving it.
Sure.
And so, with the column, you're able to, I guess, refine that flavor a little bit. You can bring that over if you want to, or you can leave it back in the still. That's what I like about having the column still. It gives us more control over the process than just let's see what happens, and then it depends on what the temperature is in the still room or what other pieces of the atmosphere are affecting it.
Sure. Yeah, it could be. I mean, especially at the craft level, it could be a very costly mistake if something doesn't come out quite the way you want it. One of the challenges that craft distilleries and craft breweries alike have is distribution. Especially now during a pandemic, it's becoming increasingly more difficult for a craft operation to distribute outside of their small bubble of the United States. Talk about the challenges you've encountered when it comes to distribution and where we can currently find Boot Hill Distillery products.
Well, it's interesting. I was actually with our distributor in Kansas, or one of the reps with our distributor in Kansas last week, and I asked him, I said, how's business? And he says, it's been amazing. Just paraphrasing, of course. But it's interesting because here we are in obviously a unprecedented event in a recent history, anyways, and we're competing with everybody. Not only are we competing with distilleries that may be our size and on our timeline, but we're competing with the big boys too. And kind of what we're seeing. And I asked him, I said, well, what's your best seller out in our area? And he said, well, of course it was Crown. And that's kind of tends to be what people are gravitating towards is what they know. And so while there may be a boom in off-premise alcohol sales, craft distilleries may or may not be being on the receiving end of that. I will say that said, now I look at our numbers weekly, and it's been steady. I haven't seen any wild swings one way or another. So in our state, and we're distributed obviously throughout the state of Kansas. We do have our fans and our supporters that are here, and they obviously remain to be so, which has been awesome to see, truthfully.
Yeah.
Now we prior to that, let's take a pandemic out of the equation. The path to market is definitely not guaranteed, and we've sort of almost run the gamut of the almost a love-hate relationship with our distributors, because it is entirely possible for a craft distillery to get lost in a large portfolio, and that may not be where we want to position ourselves. And so distributors are overwhelmed. They don't have the time to a lot of times their salesmen don't know what's in their portfolio even, and so they're selling what is making them money. Exactly. Sure. There you go. And that is the biggest challenge for craft distilleries. So we have to, it's our job to try to find either alternate or different paths to market, and really that there is a sort of there is a movement towards that of not only distributors but platforms that are geared towards smaller producers, craft distilleries. One of them is actually in your area, and it's called Spirit Hub. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they only sell to Illinois. It's an app. It's an app you download on your phone, and they only deal in craft spirits, and it's kind of awesome. But they can only sell into that one state. They're telling me that they can go into another state, but or they're going into other states soon, but that's obviously takes some time. The other platform is kind of a virtual distribution called Liberation Distribution, and they're based out of California, and they allow us to sell into the state of California, into the state of New York, also Illinois. Actually, they just opened up Illinois. So there's a little bit of a difference there. So where Spirit Hub is almost a direct consumer path, LibDib is a retail path to retail. And so, but they don't have a sales force. They don't, it's up to the producers. It's up to us to be able to go out and find the buyers and tell the story, and try to convince a liquor store buyer to bring something new on their shelves, or a bar or a restaurant for that matter. So it's a path, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not a guarantee.
Sure.
And then, of course, the other method, and I think this is something that maybe the pandemic might actually improve in some cases, is direct to consumer. We have a platform on our that allows someone to get on our website and order and have a bottle or 8 bottles or 12 cases or whatever shipped direct to their door. And that's something that I think really, we in Kansas actually have that issue. Kansas is one of the states, one of the 18 states in the union that does not allow spirits shipped direct to consumer. And so, in a lot of cases, there's other states that are still dealing with post-prohibition laws that are antiquated that really need to be changed, because I think this situation obviously proves that it's not scary and it's not dangerous, and there's still revenue that can be made because of it. And I know there's 3 states that did sort of, if not temporarily, repeal. That must have been the Ghost.
That place is 100%. I've never been there, and I can already tell you that.
They're clocking in, so
they're clocking in for the night.
The direct to spirits is another way that I think is going to be hugely important for everyone in our industry. To be allowed to do, and it's loosening up some, but there's still a long ways to go there. Yeah.
So I want to talk about last week, or was it last week or the week before, we talked with Union Horse Distilling, and they're obviously based out in Kansas. I think it was 2 weeks ago that the governor just extended the spirits to go, or the cocktails to go. Yes. We're living in a COVID world right now, and as much as we would love for it all to end, we all have to adapt to the changes put in place by local and federal government. Many distilleries have adapted by offering to-go cocktails, limited capacity seating, and even hosting virtual events to engage their customers. What has Boot Hill been doing during this shutdown, and what can visitors expect when they come to the distillery?
Well, the first thing we did, once we decided to close our tasting room on March 17th when our county reported its first case of COVID, and we decided to go ahead, out of the overabundance of caution and public health and safety, to go ahead and close our tasting room. The very next day, March 18th, the FDA pretty well gave the green light for distilleries to start producing hand sanitizer, and we joined the sort of the army of small distilleries all across the country that started to do this. And it was just kind of amazing to watch it happen and be a part of it. We went from the green light to do it, to putting a product in a bottle in about 4 days. Yeah. And in the 5th day, we were handing it out free to the public in Dodge City, and then it just kind of started to take a life of its own. So really for almost 3 or 4 weeks, it was all hand sanitizer all the time. We didn't have hardly any time to think about anything else. And then all of a sudden, yes, the governor, with a signature, just erased 100 years of prohibition by allowing to buy, of all things, oh my gosh, I can have a ready-to-drink cocktail delivered to my car. And it was just
what a time to be alive.
It's amazing. And we moved fast on that too. We said, well, shoot, let's find some cups and find some bags, and my gosh, let's put some of our cocktails, because yes, previous to that, our tasting room is a huge local attraction. This is a destination. This is a place to come and enjoy. Not only is it our manufacturing facility, but it's a place to, we've turned it into a place to enjoy cocktails. And we like to, I think we've got the best craft cocktails in Western Kansas for sure, if not beyond. But so we were able to take what our retail side, the craft side of it, the cocktail side of it, excuse me, and provide that to go. And it was just kind of cool. All of a sudden, phone was ringing again, and it was, hey, I need hand sanitizer. And oh, by the way, have you got a handful of mules we can take with us? And it's like, yeah, we'll load them up. And even then, that was kind of an adventure going through that process. And but because the whole state was able to do this, and so our craft cocktail bars, which are also good customers of ours as well. We've got a handful of them all throughout the state that support us, and they're able to continue doing that as well. So it was a boon to the whole hospitality industry,
sure,
as a whole. And it allowed us to kind of keep engaging our customers. Those that are here locally. We kind of become the local watering hole. And it allowed us to still provide a service to them. And, again, like I say, a heck of a time to be alive. This is something that nobody ever thought we would even begin to be allowed to do. Oh my gosh, the horror of horrors, selling alcohol, out the door to where you can consume it off site. That's just unheard of. And that is the cool thing, is that it was a little touch and go there for a while, whether or not that it was going to be something, how long we were going to be able to continue doing this. And it's almost giving, now it's given us, maybe this is, sort of one of those kind of little hint at future plans, but it's going to allow us to do a little R&D for another avenue for us to have our spirits out there in a ready-to-drink form. And it kind of just gives us license in a way to, test market, if you will. So
it's going to be interesting to see what happens after all this. What the new normal is going to look like, what consumerism looks like. Already, and shortly after this whole thing started, the state of Kentucky was like, let's kind of just get rid of that whole 3-tier system, just ship it straight to their door. Yeah. It's funny watching on social media, people are asking, why is the liquor business essential? Why is it essential? And my response, obviously, you have the more serious side of things where, with alcoholism, that's a very serious side effect of closing down liquor stores. But I often try to make a light heart of it and say, I know you probably don't remember, but you remember in the history books what happened the first time the United States government took away the right to drink alcohol, and that didn't end very well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with all this. I want to thank Stephanie and Lee and Hayes for joining us this evening on episode 17 of the Glass Less Travel to talk about Boot Hill Distillery. I certainly didn't think I was going to make it to episode 17. Just kind of just for fun, just to learn myself about more about the craft industry, and to give people out there who are more interested in it. The big guys are going to survive. The 1% in Kentucky that makes 95% of the world's output. Those are the guys that are going to survive. We want to showcase the craft distilleries that can use an avenue like this. You can find Boot Hill on Facebook at Boot Hill Distillery, and on Instagram at BH Distillery. You can purchase Boot Hill on apps like Spirit Hub, or you can visit the distillery at 501 West Spruce Street in Dodge City, Kansas. Stephanie, Lee, Hayes, do you have anything else before we sign off and I pour myself another glass?
Well, first off, enjoy. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for providing a little platform. And you're right. The big boys, they're going to be just fine. And I think supporting, whether it's us out here in Western Kansas or all across the country, I beat the drum of support your local distillery because it means more to us. We're all family run, and a lot of it is this is our life. And So it's more important now than ever, I think, to
Yeah.
local and support your craft distillery. So I beat that drum all the time. And I think, like I said, big boys, they're going to be fine.
Stephanie, anything from you?
I do. I was hoping Hayes would talk about it, but we did just get our medals today from the American Craft Spirit Association.
Hey, yeah. Let's see those.
Yeah, so Lee's got
Very nice.
gold. So our vodka this year took gold medal and best in class. So
Really?
for craft vodka. So we're very proud of that. And our bourbon took bronze medal this year. So
Very nice.
Gold medal at the San Francisco World Spirits Awards as well. So we've got gold medal bourbon as well.
Wow, that's an honor. The San Francisco World Spirits. Hayes, anything from you?
I was just going to say I really appreciate you asking us to be on here. I was inside of a combine about an hour and a half ago. Literally inside of it, working on one. So I'm wearing my work shirt still. I was noticing there's some stains there, and I look a little bit strung out. That's because I've been inside a dusty combine, and thank you for getting me out of that. So,
well, thanks for taking the time. I know the hour goes by. The hour goes by pretty quick. I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight and who watches each week. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe on YouTube. You can help us expand by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/theglasslesstraveled and by following us on Facebook and Instagram. We will be back next week with Sagamore Spirits out of Baltimore, Maryland. We'll also be doing another live tasting with Whiskey Fellow on July 8th. And we've got some great episodes coming up with some small distilleries and breweries coming up in the weeks ahead. Everybody, Lee, Stephanie, Hayes will stay on here for a couple more minutes, but everybody else out there, cheers. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, Mike. Thanks again.
cheers.